So good morning. Happy Father's Day. For anybody that does not know me, my name is Reverend Edward Trout. My pronouns are he, him. I'm very passionate about empowering and uplifting other people and about the arts and creativity. I'm an ordained interfaith minister through One Spirit Seminary out of New York. It's my pleasure to be talking to you today. So, Father's Day can be complicated for a lot of folks. Some of us had wonderful fathers. Some of us had fathers that were challenging or not present. If I could, for just a moment, can I have anyone in the room who is a father, biological father, adoptive father, stand up and remain standing for a moment? Great. Yep. If you are a parent who has been both mother and father, stand up if you're not already standing. Yep. If you have ever guided, taught, instructed, or protected a younger person, whatever your gender is, please stand up. This is the divine masculine at work. This is what being a father is, whether biological or not. Big round of applause for all of you. You may be seated. Whew. Last week, we really leaned into the divine feminine with Rev. Rebecca Lawson. And it was a beautiful talk all about building bridges. She also blessed us with a liturgical dance, and it has been far too long since I've been able to experience a liturgical dance in person. The week prior to that, we had Louise Dunn, who spoke about being willing and able to be a bold and brave receiver. We are so taught to give, and that is important to keep the energy going, but if we stop receiving, if we stop accepting all that good that is due to us, it blocks that flow. So being a bold and brave receiver, and I loved her illustration that, you know that car you want? It's only love. That's all there is. Everything you want, it's just love showing up as that thing, that person, that moment. It's all love. So there were, a couple weeks ago, Sally had her last of her musical workshops. At least for now. She'll have others later. But in this particular series, she brought that to an end. At that point, I knew I was talking today. I was already leaning into a theme of the prodigal son, because that deals with that familial side as well as some good metaphysical meaning in there. And Sally brought out the song that she and Rev. Susan just performed. And my heart just melted. And when we were done that night, I asked her if I could use the lyrics as part of my meditation, and of course they did me one better and brought the full song so beautifully before us. Thank you again for that. And it's funny to me looking at the story. I've known the story of the prodigal son, the prodigal child, forever. First of all, first question, what does prodigal mean? We know the story, right? What does prodigal mean? Anybody? Is that? One more time. The chosen one. Anybody else? Promised? Lost? Found? These are all the things that I thought. And then I thought, before I talk about it, I should look it up. Prodigal. To be out spending recklessly, to be like throwing these things away, living overly large, like the root of prodigious, right? Oh, you're overextending. It has come to mean all the other stuff as well, because we know the story. It's like, oh, interesting. So like going out way too big, going out spending everything you have. In the story, actually, I don't want to assume that everybody knows the story or remembers it very well. So It comes from Luke 15. The story in a nutshell, I'm not going to read it verbatim, but there's a man, a relatively wealthy man, who has two sons, an older and a younger. The younger wants to go ahead and get his inheritance from his father while his father's still alive. And rather than argue it, the father says, sure, let me split my estate. Here's your portion of it. And the son basically takes his portion of the estate, turns it into cash on hand, and within a few days heads out to a far country. And in that far country, he parties it up, he carouses, he's out there just spending that money to the point where he's kind of running out of his resources, and just then a famine hits that land. So now he has no more resources, has no food, so he ends up going to work for someone who has swine. So here he becomes a swineherd, which, as you can imagine, for a young Jewish man is not your ideal profession. So he's taking care of the pigs. The pigs are fed with these carob pods, and he so badly wants to just eat the pig food because he's starving, and nobody will give him anything. And he finally comes to the realization, you know what? My father still has an estate, and there are people back on that estate that work for him that are fed better and cared for better than I am. I will go back. I will say, my father, I'm so sorry. I wasted all of this. Please take me in as one of your servants. So he goes back from that distant country, and even before he gets there, his father sees him coming, runs out to greet him with open arms, hugs him, says to the others there, bring me a fine robe, bring me a ring to put on his finger, bring me sandals, kill the fatted calf, the fattest calf, depending on the translation you use. We're going to have a feast to celebrate his return because he was dead to us and now he's back. So as all of this hubbub is going on and the feast is getting started, the older brother, who's just coming in from working all day in the fields, is saying, hey, what's going on? They said, oh, well, your brother's back and we're throwing him a big party. So the older brother goes to the dad and basically says, what's up? I stayed here, I did everything you wanted, and you would never even give me like a little goat that I could have a party with my friends. You're giving him the fattest of the calves. And the reply is, yes, because he's come back to us. Your brother who was dead is alive. He was lost, and now he's found. That's the story in a nutshell. There is so much in that story. We take it often at the face value, which is valuable and true, that we can go out and we can mess up and we can come back to God, to the divine, and it's okay. We're accepted back. That's really the surface of the story. And it's funny, as we were talking about this story in Sally's workshop, Lene, who's traveling right now, bless you wherever you're traveling, but Lene said, I always thought of the two sons as like the two parts of us, these two sides of our personality. And I said, oddly enough, that is exactly on par with the metaphysical interpretation of the story. The two brothers represent our natures, the nature that wants to go out and experience the whole world, all the good, all the bad. The reason why the Amish have that, the year where they go out into the world to experience it. And then many come back, some don't. But that's that desire. That's that part of us. And then there's the part that is the moral, religious side, the spiritual side. So I want to go just a little bit more of the metaphysical meaning of the story from the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. So I talked about the sons already. The faraway country. What would that represent? You're smart, you know these things. Trust your intuition. What does the faraway country represent? What's that? The unknown. The grass is always greener. This thing over here must be better. What was that? The adventure. And what do we have here, Jeff? pulling ourselves away from God. Not that we can ever really leave God, but we can certainly turn our focus away from God. So those other things, absolutely. It is those things, but the bigger overarching thing is that that brother represents us turning away from that spiritual nature to go experience the world. And again, it's something that is kind of expected that will happen at some point in most lives. So when we are coming back to that source, back to parents, we've been out in the world, we've made our mistakes, we come back. There are a couple of things that the younger brother does. First of all, and I'm going to use this word and then I'm going to talk about it because it's a little bit of a loaded word. He's sorry for it, right? He repents. When I say repent, how many of you see billboards with hellfire and things in your, right? Right. Such a misuse of the term. Repent. Rethink. Pent is simply that root of thinking, being penitent or whatever. It's to rethink, taking what I see and reframing it. And that's exactly what he does. He sees the choices that he makes and he reframes them. He says, these were not wise choices. I can see it differently now. So he repents, and there's also in the story, termed as confession. Confesses to his father, right? And again, confession comes with a lot of baggage. So ignoring what we think of the baggage of confession, why would confession be an important step in returning back to the divine? God already knows everything, right? The universe knows. I'm not telling the universe anything it doesn't know. So when I confess, what is actually happening? Releasing, there's a hand over here. Getting honest with yourself. Both of those, right? I'm not holding on to it. I'm being honest. It's an honest evaluation of myself. So those are the two steps. Reevaluate, rethink what happened, and be honest about your part in it. That's how we return to the divine, and that's how we come back to open arms. So, as we're doing these things, I like to think of that step of getting honest with ourselves as the first step of the 12-step program. Whether you're in 12-step or not, most of us are very familiar with that first step, or at least variations of it, right? The simplified version is often just the first step is admitting that you have a problem, right? But the more full version of that, at least as I know it, is admitting that I am powerless over whatever this thing is. Like, I've already made this bed, I'm powerless over the situation, and my life has become unmanageable. That's that self-acknowledgement. There's an article written by Unity minister and writer Jim Lewis on the prodigal son, and he talks about the prodigal son could be, is often called the lost son, which is one of the terms that we talked for prodigal. He also talks about, and I wholeheartedly agree, it's the prodigal son, the prodigal daughter, coming home to the father, the mother, like they're all interchangeable. Gender doesn't matter in any of this. It's the child and the creator parent that we're talking about. He also talks about how parables often have one meaning, but this is a very layered parable, right? It's not just, as I said, it's not just the, oh, you're always welcome back. Because we can do things like examine the father's attitude. What is the expectation if you go to a father who's still alive and say, hey, I want my inheritance now, Dad? What answer are you likely to get in this world? No, you're going to wait until I die like everybody else in the family, right? There was none of that. This alludes to that freedom of choice that we have in spirit. Okay, that's how you want to approach your life. And the father probably already has a pretty good idea of what that outcome is going to be. The father was young once and knows, oh, if I had a pile of cash at my disposal when I was that age, I would probably be out partying and wasting it. He knows, but says, okay, I'm not going to hold you back from your life experience. Experience life on your terms. And, the son obviously very deliberately and consciously made some very foolish choices. And then gets to the point where when he does finally come home, he's coming back. We are coming back. But there's that other part of ourselves sitting in judgment of the thing we experienced. Right? Well, why is he getting this celebration when I did all this work? I stayed spiritual. Because that's how we have to reconcile, right? The soul finds its own way to find the circumstances that will allow the most growth. And growth does not mean it's comfortable. Growth does not mean it's easy. It just means it's growth, it's evolution, it's change. Interestingly enough, Eric Butterworth, Unity minister and author, in his book, Discover the Power Within You, there's a portion where he's talking about the Beatitudes. And gets to the final Beatitude, blessed are the persecuted, for they shall see God. Now, I'm bringing that up because in the discussion of it, he talks about the persecuted and the persecutor, and that we are both. Just like the brothers, we are both. When we judge ourselves for those failures, judge ourselves for being human, judge ourselves for finding that experience, we are persecuting ourselves because we fell short of God. And so all of that is wrapped up in this story as well. Judging ourselves when we fall short because we're seeing God and we're seeing the distance between us. That's why the persecuted see God, because we can see where the gap is between what I chose and what God would have chosen for me, even though we all experience that. And I had a quote from Eric somewhere in here too. I loved the quote. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. Eric Butterworth said, "But the greatest mistake is in believing that we're, quote, only human. We are human in expression, but divine in creation and limitless in potentiality." So if the greatest thing in all the world is knowing and loving and serving God, then the greatest mistake in all the world, according to Butterworth, is forgetting that God dwells within us, expressing through us and as us. That is what we are seeking to return to. As the prodigal children, we are trying to get back to, working to get back to. And we feel like it's a struggle to get there when in reality what we have to do is acknowledge our part and see how that part has somehow made us grow or served us. And that brings us back into the arms of the divine. The Father's arms. Just a portion of the lyrics here. The tireless part of you can never be stolen, no matter if some days you may feel small, for God has promised to be with us always, and God will never leave you. You're not away from God at all. We go out and we try things. We are pulled away from the spiritual. We go to that far country because we're living in the world. And that's what the world wants you to do. Go experience. And that's why we're here. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. We are meant to experience it. And we are meant to grow, and we are meant to come back to mindfulness. Those small repeated acts, sometimes we think it's too much to try to do it all and get back to God. Just small things, small things. There was a data over dogma discussion just this week. A few of you were there. A small group of some great discussion. And one of the things that came up was talking, and by the way, it's the 10-ish commandments because there really aren't just 10 in there. We've consolidated it down to 10, but that's a real simplification. But one of the commandments being not taking the Lord's name in vain. And in the discussion in the podcast, they were talking about how that doesn't mean just not using swears, right? It's not that. Dan McClellan, the Bible scholar, talks about how from the words used, what it really is talking about is taking the name of God and elevating that name of God in a worthless manner elevating it in a way that we don't intend to keep or in a way that somehow actually defiles it. So the biggest example he gave is when you take an oath, like, I swear to God I will be there on time. Do you? Do you? So those kind of things. We also in Unity very much understand the I am as the name of God and the misuse of the I am. Careful what you place after that. And I find myself saying that to people all the time, whether they're Unity folks or not. Careful what you affirm after that I am, because that's what you're putting out there. So that discussion at the Data Over Dogma then sort of turned to the concept of a swear jar. And I got kind of tickled by that idea, and I thought, that would be a great Father's Day gift, is a swear jar. But we also talked about whether swearing, whether the words that come out of our mouth when we are angry have a vibration. Everything in the world is just vibration, and especially sound. And we probably don't want to lean into those words. So rather than glorify swearing with a swear jar, I decided a different tactic. I have a little mindfulness jar. So you each can have one. There are a bunch at the back. The Jameses can help distribute at the end. So here's how I work with mine, just so you know. I've got all these little decorative glass globs that you find in like vases and things. So during the week, I really try to keep track of, yes, if I'm saying, as most of you know, if I'm in traffic and it's like I'm stopped and we're not moving and I cannot see any reason why we're not moving, words may come out that I really are not in my best interest. Words to a faraway country, right? So I will make note of those. Or if I'm home, I will go to the jar and I will put one in. But end of the day, it's kind of a reconciliation of, I turned away from who I intend to be this many times during the day. Now, at the end of a week, I'm going to dump them back out, and I'm going to make a pledge to then, I'm going to give extra based on the number of things that are in there. I will give financially based on that. You could also, if you want to choose the same route, you could give time instead, you could give of your talent, whatever it might be. You could also use it differently. You could look for ways that's like, I did something that I thought was inspirational and or inspired. There's one for me. Great. I recommend using it as a weekly thing just to track how you're doing. The good, the bad, both, or find a different purpose for it. Maybe you write things down that you're troubled with and you're putting them in here. Maybe you write things down that you're inspired by and put them in here. Up to you. But it is meant to be a weekly thing. So again, that is the mindfulness jar. These cute little things, right? Because I couldn't give out swear jars. I just couldn't give out swear jars. With our approaches here at Unity, we have the principles where we talk about knowing all this stuff, and our fifth principle is you can't just know it, you have to do it, which pulls into a Henri Nouwen quote for me. You don't think your way into a new kind of living. You live your way into a new kind of thinking. So it may start up here, because we do think it first, but then we have to live it, and that living fully changes the thinking. It starts with our being. So again, this is just a tool and a way to, again, rethink, to repent, to take, I'm going to take that moment that pulled me off of my peace, and I'm going to repent that moment. I will think differently about that moment, and I will take ownership for having made a choice in that moment. And those are the two things that bring me back as the prodigal, back to the divine. So if you can repent, if you can rethink it, as Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right?